Growing up in the Ohio weather patterns, and FYI, if you were born, I don't know, after 1990-something, when I was a kid, this is what winter was like in Ohio, right? You guys remember that? Like every winter was just like this. But February for me has always been a month that reminds me that we're almost there. We are almost there, right? Christmas and New Year's and January is all behind us. And if we could just make it through the shorter little month of February, we have hope that spring is on its way, that there is still grass. Not just snow, right? I don't know what February means to you. Maybe it means nothing to you. Anybody have a February birthday? Yeah, okay. All right. Nina's birthday's in February. So in just a few days, she'll be 5. I can't believe that. But maybe it means nothing to you. I don't know. Or maybe you get really excited about Groundhog Day. I mean, maybe that's the thing. Maybe you get jazzed up about President's Day, right? I mean, that's a good day. But for most of us, immediately, when we think of February, whether we like it or not, what do we think of? Valentine's Day, right? V-Day. That's right, fellas. I just gave you a 14-day jumpstart reminder. Go get, just do something. Just do something for your ladies, right? And it's hard not to think of it this way, because you walk into any retail store right now, today, and you are immediately greeted by these huge displays of hearts and flowers and stuffed bears and chocolate and stuff. And unless you're completely heartless, it does kind of make you think about the people in your life that you love, right? The one that you love, your sweetheart, your Valentine. Commercialized? Yes, without a doubt. But and it could get a little ridiculous. I had some fun this week. I thought it would be cool just to Google what some celebrity Valentine days, what their Valentine's Day looks like, right? Celebrities, those people. And you can imagine this stuff gets crazy. My favorite was this. There's a guy named Michael B. Jordan. You guys know who he is? He was the guy that played in Creed. Remember those movies? There were 3 of them. Creed, great actor. Those were great movies. Valentine's Day 2021, Michael B. Jordan, not the basketball player, but the actor. He rented out an aquarium, the whole thing, so that he and his honey could enjoy the fish alone. And in the tunnel, you know, where the fish swim over top of you, he had set up a very romantic dinner complete with candlelight and rose petals and a privately catered 6-course meal from the luxury Japanese eatery Nobu. Don't get any ideas, babe. Their hotel room was filled with more flowers and candles and red rose petals covering the bed and all around the bubble bath. Did I mention this was all for his girlfriend, Lori Harvey, in 2021? And then after that night of romance and food and all the real gift came, where he handed her a certified slip for stock for Hermès, which is a luxury goods house in Paris, France. I Googled yesterday, as of close of business yesterday, the stock sold for $2,029 a share. I don't know how many shares he got her, but I bet it was more than one. People magazine named Jordan the most romantic man on the planet. And Jordan and Harvey called it quits in June of 2022, so, you know, don't go crazy, guys. Scale it back. Get her a bear. Get her a bear. So point is this. Let me bring this down. When we think about February and Valentine's Day, we tend to think about relationships. We think about those people in our lives that we love and are choosing to or have chosen to be in the ultimate relationship with. True? You do. You think about Valentine's Day, that's what you think about. So what does this have to do with the book of Ruth? It has everything. Everything to do with the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth is a perfect picture of how God relates to his people through relationship and how God almost always brings redemption through those relationships. Ruth is such an important book. It gets overlooked. It's 4 chapters, 85 verses that are buried between 2 massive historical books of Joshua and 1 Kings. But it is so important that we understand the narrative of this great big story of God through the lens of Ruth. And that we understand the ultimate message of the Bible, which is, spoiler alert, Jesus. Everything points to Jesus and his redemptive work. And so, sort of like February is a little connector month between winter and spring, Ruth is kind of a connective writing between Joshua and 1 Kings. And as we will see at the end of this book in a few weeks, its message is designed to show us how God keeps the bloodline moving toward the birth of the Messiah, Jesus. It's so good. So good. So let's get into it. If you have your Bibles, turn in them or turn them on to the book of Ruth. Again, it's after Judges. I kept saying Joshua, didn't I? Judges and 1 Kings. Judges and 1 Kings. What? Well, speak up, man. I love Jarvis is in the house today. I love you, dude. Judges, 1 Kings, Ruth. 4 chapters, 85 verses. Let's start in verse 1. It says, "In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and his 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And when they reached Moab, they settled there." The thing I love about the story is Ruth begins with the element that every great story begins with, and that's conflict. So many of our relationships are wrought with conflict. And so right off the bat, we can relate to this story before we even get into it. It sets somewhere in the times that we read about in the book just prior. It says, "In the days when the judges ruled in Israel." So this was written somewhere in the realm of that time of the book prior. These were difficult times for the people of Israel. And this story unfolds somewhere during that time, and it begins with a famine in the land of Judah. And the first character we are introduced to is a man named Elimelech. His name means, in Hebrew, "God is my king." That's interesting. And he decides to take his family and leave the land of promise, the land of Canaan, and go to a foreign country to live among a foreign people called the Moabites. Now, I want to pause here for a second because you know I love the Bible and I like connecting it. And as a church, as we continue to get our arms around the great big story of God as a whole, I feel like we need to pause and talk about these Moabites. If for you Bible students, that should ring a bell. That should ring a bell. Who are these people, the Moabites, and where did they come from? All right, remember back in Genesis 19, a guy named Lot in a city named Sodom and Gomorrah? God sends 2 angels to rescue Lot and his family just before he completely annihilates the city of Sodom and Gomorrah because of their gross wickedness, sin, and rebellion. Remember, Lot's wife turns back to look, and she turns into a pillar of salt. And Lot escapes with his 2 daughters. They get out alive. They make it to a cave in the mountains. And while hiding out, it dawns on Lot's oldest daughter that since their husbands didn't make it out of the city alive, they will have no man to give them kids and continue their lineage. So she comes up with a really jacked up plan. They get dad drunk, and they get pregnant by him so that his lineage will carry on. So that's what they do. The oldest on the first night and the younger on the next night. And 2 boys were conceived and born to these sisters. One's name was Moab. The other's Ben-Ami. And from these 2 boys come the Moabites and the Ammonites. And if you read through Numbers and Deuteronomy and Joshua and Judges, you will see that these people come up over and over and over as the arch enemies of God. See the tension? And it is to these people that Elimelech takes his wife Naomi. Her name means sweet one. And their boys Mahlon, whose name means sick. That's encouraging. And Chilion, whose name means ailing. And they try to establish a new life in Moab. So you see what's happening here. Let's pan out a little bit. They're living in the land of promise, the land of Canaan, the land that God gave to them. A famine, trouble, strife, conflict comes along. And they decide to move into the land of Moab, away from the promises of God. And they try to create a life in this space. And things get worse before they get better. Let's read on. Verse 3. Then Elimelech died. And Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, not Ophrah. You got to read that right. Orpah, and the other a woman named Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. And this left Naomi alone without her 2 sons or her husband. Then Naomi heard that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So the famines lifted. So Naomi and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living. This is a beautiful phrase. And took the road that would lead them back to Judah. That's a cool phrase. What a heavy time in Naomi's life. And I can imagine, she's a human being. I'm sure that in the quiet of the night, that she surely had to be thinking things like, why did we ever make the move to Moab in the first place? If we had just stayed put. If we had only, maybe my husband would still be alive. Maybe my sons would still be alive. The rabbi oral traditions state that they saw the cause of the death of Elimelech and his sons being because they left the land of Canaan. If we had just been patient and waited for God to restore the crops in Judah, if only, man, we've all been there, haven't we? If only I had just made a different decision in this moment or in that moment, gosh, man, everything would be different. And it's so easy to get stuck there. Naomi recognizes that these 2 daughters-in-law that she acquired along the way shouldn't have to suffer as a result of what she describes in verse 13 as the Lord raising his fist against her. That's how she felt. And she didn't feel that it was fair for these daughters-in-law to have to follow along behind. We read in verses 8 through 17 how Naomi then turns and encourages them to return home to Moab. She says, go back home to your families and to your mothers, to Moab. And they insist that they want to go with her to her people. But Naomi begs them, stating that even if she could get pregnant and have more sons, they wouldn't want to wait around, right, for the boys to grow up so that they can marry them. And so finally, Orpah is convinced as she turns back as she heads back home to Moab. But Ruth, in verse 14, it tells us that Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. Naomi said to her, look, your sister-in-law is going back, and you should do the same. And this is where we see what we want to focus on in this first week of the series. Now remember in the beginning, and speaking of relationship, I made the statement that God often brings redemption through relationship rather than in isolation. Did you know that? So often God redeems things through relationships. More often, I believe, than he does in isolation. Naomi wants to isolate. And with good reason. But we see something in the character of this Moabite girl that will not allow that to happen. And it is in this that God begins to move. Let's get back into the text. Verse 16. Skip ahead to 16. But Ruth replied, don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. And may the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." Mic drop, right? What do you say to that? I'd say that Mahlon was one pretty lucky dude. He was able to score a woman with this type of loyalty and character and commitment. What a woman. And what an intense loyalty and faithfulness. Ruth embodies something that I really want us to understand in this first week of the series as we study through this book. And this is it. It's about deep character. We want to talk about how character connects to relationship. There's a principle here that's so important, I think, for us to understand as it relates to relationship. Whether it's a romantic relationship that you are in, or one that you are looking to be in, or if it's a relationship with your children, if it's a relationship with other family members, or friendships, or even employer-employee relationships in the marketplace, there's a principle, and this is it. Character creates connection. Character creates connection. Character is that quality or trait inside that demonstrates who you really are when you gain nothing for being that person. Character is just what you do because that's who you are. When the true character of Ruth is revealed, we begin to see God move in the story. Naomi's life has been shattered. Her family has been taken from her. Ruth's life has been disrupted as she has been taken from her family. And they are both feeling the sense of loss. But the story of the Bible, listen, the story of the Bible is all about God giving back that which has been taken. Did you hear that? The story of the Bible is all about God redeeming and restoring and giving back. And he has found someone here who possesses the character qualities that will cause him to step in and redeem things through this relationship between Ruth and Naomi. Faithful character opens the door for redemptive relationships. Let's keep reading. Verse 22. So, Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law, Ruth, the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in late spring at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now, there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. Now, most scholars agree that Boaz was likely the nephew of Elimelech. So Boaz's father, his name was Salmon. He was Elimelech's brother, making Boaz the cousin of Mahlon, Ruth's deceased husband, right? So you get all those connected relationships? And here's where we really begin to see God step in and make movements behind the scene to create the connection. Chapter 2, verse 2 says, "One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, 'Let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it.'" And yet another strong character trait that we see in Ruth, and her loyalty to be caring for her mother-in-law. Naomi takes this initiative to volunteer and to go out and to follow along behind the harvesters in the field and to pick up the scraps of grain that fall out of their bundles as they're getting them. Ruth is loyal to Naomi. She wants to provide for Naomi, and she's a hard worker. Verse 3 says this, "So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech." I love how the Bible says, "And as it happened," as it just so happened. Remember the theme of this book. It's all about God redeeming and restoring and how he does it through relationships. So because of Ruth's character to not only stay with, but to be loyal to Naomi, she gets up, she takes care of her as if she were her own mother, and then God begins to position people, as a result, in places to redeem and restore. You see how this begins to happen? Through her faithfulness, through her character, through her loyalty, God takes note and begins to slowly kairos, position people to redeem and restore relationships. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi positions her in Boaz's field. God uses her relationship with Naomi to connect her to what would be her future. And this is the way that God is working behind the scenes in your life. Even when you're not faithful to him, God's so good. But when you are faithful to him, when your character is intact, God begins to take note and make moves. Verse 4, it says, while she was there in the field, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, and he greeted the harvesters. The Lord be with you, he said. The Lord bless you, the harvesters replied. When was the last time your boss came in on a Monday morning and greeted you like that? The Lord bless you. What? What happened to you? Right? But it doesn't speak to the character of Boaz. It tells us a lot about the type of man that he was, the kind of employer that he was. Now, Boaz takes notice that there's this random girl picking up leftover sheaves in the field, and so he asks his foreman who she belongs to. And the foreman tells him, well, she is the Moabite woman that came back with Naomi, your Aunt Naomi. And that morning, she came out and asked if she could gather behind the harvesters. And he adds that she was a hard worker and she's just taken a couple of breaks in the shelter, something that a good foreman would take notice of, right? And let's read on. In verse 8, chapter 2, verse 8, it says, Boaz then went over and said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting and then follow them. I've warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well. Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. What have I done to deserve such kindness? She asked. I'm only a foreigner. Yes, I know, Boaz replied, but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done. Wow. I'm pretty sure this is the first time in Scripture that we see flirting, actual flirting happening. I'm not trying to take away from the Scripture, but I think if you're reading this right, you can see. But really, Boaz is taking note of the character qualities that he has heard about. And now he is seeing and witnessing in Ruth firsthand, and he likes what he sees. And in this, we can begin to see another relationship form. As God continues to redeem this situation that Naomi and Ruth have found themselves in. So let's finish this section of the story. And then I want to try to draw some application out for us. Okay, so verse 14, chapter 2, verse 14, it says, at mealtime, Boaz called her, come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine. Ooh. Michael B. Jordan thought he was doing well with the aquarium, and you can dip your bread in the sour wine. So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. And when Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, let her gather grain right from among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some of the heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up, and don't give her a hard time. You can see him, guys, okay, boss. Somebody's got a crush, right? Clearly, throughout the course of the workday, Boaz had been giving Ruth some thought. At lunch break, he invites her to the cool table. You guys have a cool table in high school? College? Cool table. I never made it to the cool table. And he gives her all the food that she wants. And then he pulls his crews aside and he gives them new instruction. And did you notice the progression? I mean, this isn't one work day. She is being promoted. Before she was to follow along behind the young women, remember? The harvesters, and the young women who would follow along behind the harvesters to pick up anything that was left behind so not to waste any crop. And originally, Ruth was to follow behind those women. So she was getting the leftovers of the leftovers. But now, she's allowed to just get in there with the harvesters and get at the sheaves. And he instructs them to pull out some of the heads of grain and accidentally drop them to make it easier on her. Scripture doesn't say this, but I am a guy, and I can see when a dude has fallen. And you can see right here in this story how this is unfolding, and it's so much fun. It's a great story. We're going to kind of pause on the story there because we've got 3 more weeks. We're going to dive into the rest of it. But let's pull some key thoughts out of the story and try to make some application for ourselves as it relates to relationships, okay? Here's the first thought. Faithfulness is practiced in private relationships. We like when things are public. We like when people see our faithfulness. We do. It's who we are. We're human beings. It's a part of our wiring. But faithfulness is practiced in private relationships. Ruth's character allows her to choose Naomi even though it would cost her everything. You think about the idea of the Israelites, God's chosen people, leaving Canaan, Bethlehem in this case, to go live among the Moabites. How they may have been viewed. Can you imagine what it would be like to be a Moabite going now to live among the Israelites in the land of Canaan? She's losing everything. It's costing her everything. Her only connection to Naomi is her husband, Mahlon, who is now dead. I mean, she legally has no obligation to leave her home, to leave her people, to leave her family and her identity, to go with this woman to a foreign country among a people who have been told that she is the enemy. It would be scary for a young woman. But she's faithful. And she does what she believes to be the right thing even when nobody is watching. As far as she can see, she has nothing to gain in doing it. But for whatever reason, loyalty is just who she is. And so she continues to be faithful to Naomi. And for that reason, God is faithful to her. Character creates connection. Character creates connection, and faithfulness is practiced in private relationships. I think it was Tony Robbins who said, I believe it was him, that you are rewarded in public for what you practice in private. It was actually Jesus who said that before Tony Robbins. In Matthew chapter 6, verse 4, remember he said, then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. When we are faithful with the few, God will give us more. Right? So faithfulness is practiced in private relationships. Second principle I think we can see here is that reputation precedes romance. Now, when we're talking about relationships, we're talking about all kinds of relationships, right? Not just romantic relationships with your spouse or the one you're eyeballing, hoping that will be your spouse. So it could be your relationship with your kids, your relationship with family and friends, your, like we said, employer, employee, any relationship. But let's focus on the narrative here and the relationship between Ruth and Boaz that we see developing. Here is why you can see this relationship coming from a mile away, just by reading the story. Boaz is known for his kindness and integrity. The man literally blesses his employees when he shows up at the office, right? The Talmud, which is the rabbinic literature written around the Old Testament, describes Boaz as a wealthy, elderly, and highly righteous leader in Bethlehem. He's a prominent community leader, and he is regarded in the tradition as a member of the Sanhedrin. So we learn a little bit more about this guy. His reputation preceded him. Ruth is known for her humility and her spirit of sacrifice. Boaz himself said in chapter 2, verse 11, I know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since your husband has passed. Word had gotten around about this Moabite woman who just waltzed into town with her mother-in-law, Naomi, that she was selfless and humble, that she was loyal and she was loving, and he could see for himself that she was a hard worker who took ownership of the relationship with her mother-in-law. And Boaz is thinking, she is a catch for sure. But whether it's a romance or bromance, right, Jarvis? Your relationship, men's relationship with men, women, your relationship with women, your romantic relationship, regardless of what it is, people are going to be attracted to people who are known for being good people. And it's good to have a name for someone who's known to be good people. Remember, character creates connection no matter the level of relationship, and reputation precedes romance. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. The third principle I think we can see from this is who you are becoming matters more than who you are connected to. Character counts. Character counts. It may be the most important thing. Character is a capital that you can't live without. Just ask someone who has lost it. It is hard to rebuild. It is hard to get that back. So circling back to the season of Valentine's and all the things that people tend to think about, at least through the first half of the month, right? Through the 14th. We think about romantic relationships. So let me just encourage you in this. Whether you are married or are single and looking, the most important thing that you can be doing in this season is the very same thing. You might think that's odd to say. If I'm married, I should probably be behaving this way. If I'm single, I should probably be behaving in a way that makes people want to marry me, right? But no. For you, whether you're married in that relationship or you're single and looking, or you're just single and you're not looking. You're happy with what God's given you. That's fine. For all of us, our behavior should be exactly the same, and that is this. If you are single and hoping one day to find someone to build a life with, you know what you should be doing every day? Showing up as the best version of yourself. If you are married in a relationship, the one thing that you need to be concentrating on every single day, showing up as the very best version of yourself. Building character, staying consistent in who you are, allowing that to drive what you do. And by trusting God, who wants to give you the pure desire of your heart. That's what God longs to do. And he will show up. And he will begin to curate things. Kairos moments. Working behind the scenes through the course of your life to lead you in the direction that he has absolutely planned ahead of time for you to go. You know, the interesting thing about the book of Ruth is that outside the characters speaking about, the book never talks about God. Isn't that interesting? The book never references God outside of some character conversations. Yet God is throughout the entirety of the book. The unique thing about the book of Ruth is while God is never mentioned in the direct sense, God is weaving, tying together and curating and creating. And guys, sometimes you don't feel God in your life, but he's there. And he's working behind the scenes, and he's curating, and he's creating, and he's connecting, and he's redeeming. And the book of Ruth shows us that he often does that through relationships. You guys can come on up. We're going to close out. And as we continue through this story in this series, we're going to see how God works to redeem and restore Naomi through Ruth. Naomi's life has been broken. And God will restore what has been broken. He will give back what has been taken. And he does that through the relationship of Naomi and Ruth. We'll also see how God provides for Ruth through Boaz. And ultimately, we'll see how God advances his plan and his purpose for eternity. That's you and me. through ordinary people who are faithful and consistent. Such a great love story. No dating apps required here, man. This is just normal people being faithful and God being God to connect them.